What would you do if you had $1, a dying truck, and an 8-year-old daughter who hadn't smiled in 6 months? Maya Torres knew the answer because she was living it. The cab of her 1994 Chevy Silverado had become their entire universe, a cramped, rust-stained bubble that smelled like gasoline, old coffee, and the particular staleness of lives compressed into too little space. She sat in the driver's seat at dawn, hands clenched on the steering wheel, staring down a lonely stretch of Arizona desert road that shimmered in the early heat. Beside her, Lily slept curled against the passenger door, her small body wrapped around a threadbare teddy bear that had seen better years. The child's face was peaceful in sleep, but Maya could see the worry lines that had no business being on an 8-year-old's forehead. The envelope sat on the dashboard where it had been for 3 days. Sophia's handwriting, looping and careful, spelled out Maya's name in blue ink. The word urgent was stamped in red across the corner, and beneath it, smaller letters that made Maya's stomach clench every time she glanced over. Dad's in ICU. She couldn't open it. Not yet. Opening it would make whatever was inside real, and Maya had spent the last 6 months running from reality with the determination of someone who knew that stopping meant drowning. Her hands trembled as she turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, caught. The fuel gauge needle sat below the E, resting on that last invisible reserve that mechanics knew about but never trusted. She had maybe 20 miles left. Maybe. The transmission had been slipping for weeks, a problem she would have diagnosed and fixed in an afternoon back when she had a lift and tools and a shop that bore her family's name, back when she had anything at all. The truck lurched forward and Lily stirred but didn't wake. Maya watched the road unfold ahead, the desert landscape endless and indifferent. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels, their arms raised in poses that could have been surrender or praise. The sun climbed higher, turning the sky from purple to pink to that particular shade of blue that Arizona owned in summer. She was 33 years old, but the face in the rearview mirror belonged to someone older. The lines around her eyes whispered of longer battles, days spent under the hoods of broken cars, hands black with grease that never fully washed away. Nights watching medical bills pile up in stacks that seemed to grow faster than she could pay them. The silence that followed her mother's last breath, heavy and absolute, the kind of quiet that changed the shape of the world. Maya had been the girl with grease under her fingernails and dreams in her heart. She'd grown up in her grandfather's shop, learning to read engines the way other kids learned to read books. By 9, she could change oil. By 12, she could rebuild a carburetor. By 15, she could diagnose problems just by listening to the way a motor turned over. Torres Auto Repair had been her inheritance and her identity, 40 years of family history compressed into a single-bay garage in Phoenix, where 3 generations had turned wrenches and built trust. The bank had taken it last winter. She'd signed the papers on a Tuesday afternoon, her signature shaking across lines that legally transferred ownership of everything her grandfather had built with his bare hands of everything her father had given his life to, everything she had failed to save. One by one, she'd sold the tools. Each wrench and socket felt like pawning pieces of her soul. The Snap-on toolbox her grandfather had bought in 1960, cherry red with chrome handles, went for $850 to a collector who didn't know its history. The hydraulic lift her father had installed in 1998, the one he'd been so proud of, sold for $1,400 to another shop. The air compressor, the diagnostic computer, the socket sets, the specialty tools for foreign cars. All of it scattered to strangers who would never know that her grandfather's hands had worn the rubber grips smooth, that her father had taught her the difference between a metric and standard socket using those very pieces, that she'd dreamed of teaching her own daughter the same lesson someday. She'd kept one thing, a single adjustable wrench, old and heavy, with Torres etched into the handle by her father's hand. He'd given it to her when she was 9, the day she'd successfully changed her first tire. The gift of your first tool is sacred, mija. Take care of it, and it will take care of you. The wrench sat in the glove compartment now, wrapped in a shop rag that had belonged to her mother. It was worth maybe $15. It was worth everything. Bishop's salvage appeared on the horizon like a mirage. Acres of twisted metal and sun-bleached skeletons of vehicles that had once carried lives and laughter. The chain-link fence groaned as Maya nudged the truck through the open gate, and dust billowed up behind them in slow clouds. She parked beneath a lopsided sign that read Bishop's Salvage, most of the letters hanging on for dear life. The engine ticked as it cooled. Maya sat for a moment, gathering whatever was left of her courage. Her right hand was wrapped in duct tape, blood seeping through where she'd cut it yesterday pulling a radiator from a junked Honda for $40 cash. The wound probably needed stitches, but urgent care cost money, and she had exactly $1.63 to her name. She'd spent the 63 cents on a protein bar that morning. Split it with Lily. The door of the truck opened with a shriek of protest. Lily woke, blinking in the sudden brightness, her small hand instinctively reaching for Maya's. Together, they stepped out into the heat, which wrapped around them like a wet blanket. The salvage yard stretched in every direction, a graveyard of machines organized in rows that suggested order but felt like chaos. School buses with their windows blown out. Sedans crushed into cubes. A refrigerator graveyard where white hulks leaned against each other like tired soldiers. Movement caught Maya's eye. A man emerged from behind a stack of hubcaps, wiping his hands on a rag that might have been clean 20 years ago. He was stout and weathered, 60-something, with white stubble on his chin and a wrench in his back pocket like it was part of his spine. His overalls bore oil stains that had stories, and his eyes were sharp despite the wrinkles around them. He took one look at Maya's truck, and his expression shifted from neutral to knowing. That transmission's gonna drop in 500 miles. Maya's spine straightened. I know. I'm the one who's been nursing it. The man's eyebrows rose. Mechanic? Used to be. The words tasted like ash. Used to be a lot of things. Used to have a shop, a home, a husband, a mother, a father. Used to believe that hard work and skill mattered more than luck. Used to sleep through the night without waking up in cold sweats, calculating which bills could slide another week. The man studied her for a long moment, his gaze moving from her bandaged hand to Lily's too thin frame to the truck that was clearly on its last legs. Something in his expression softened, though his voice stayed gruff. Name's Roy Bishop. This is my yard. Maya Torres. She gestured to Lily. My daughter. Roy nodded at the child, who pressed closer to Maya's leg. Then he looked back at Maya with an intensity that made her want to step back. I need someone who knows engines. 3 months' work. Minimum wage, room and board included. You do the job right. There's an RV in the back. That's yours at the end. The world tilted slightly. Maya's vision tunneled, sounds growing distant and then rushing back too loud. An offer. Actual work. A place to stay. The impossibility of it made her suspicious immediately. What's the catch? Roy's weathered face creased into something that might have been a smile. No catch, just one rule. Whatever you find in that RV belongs to the story, not to you. Maya blinked. What story? The one you're about to tell. Before Maya could process that cryptic statement, the sound of an engine cut through the desert air. Expensive, smooth, nothing like the dying wheeze of her Silverado. A black Mercedes sedan rolled up to the gate, dust rising in its wake, but somehow not quite touching its polished surface. The door opened and a man stepped out, 50-something, wearing a suit that cost more than Maya had made in 6 months at the shop. His watch caught the sunlight, genuine gold, the kind of casual wealth that announced itself in whispers. Roy's entire body tensed. The shift was subtle, but Maya caught it, years of reading body language and difficult customers making her attuned to the change. The man in the suit approached with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no and meant it. Roy, I'm tripling my offer. $850,000 for this lot. Cash, today. Roy's voice went flat. Still no. The man's gaze swept the salvage yard with visible disdain, then landed on Maya and Lily. His expression shifted into something that made Maya's skin crawl, a particular condescension that men like him wore like cologne. Hiring vagrants now? This place is a liability, Bishop. Sell before I make it a problem. Roy took a step forward, and despite being shorter than the suit by half a foot, something about his posture made the other man pause. Get off my property, Richard. The man, Richard, smiled, but there was no warmth in it. He looked at Maya again, and she saw calculation in his eyes. Whatever he's paying you, sweetheart, won't matter when this place is condemned. Then he climbed back into his Mercedes, slammed the door, and drove off with a spray of gravel that felt deliberately theatrical. The dust settled slowly. Lily's hand was tight around Maya's, her small fingers digging in with the strength of fear. Roy stood watching the retreating vehicle until it disappeared beyond the fence line. Maya's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Who was that?" "Richard Caldwell, real estate developer, wants to turn this land into condos or a shopping center or whatever makes him the most money. He's been trying to buy me out for 3 years, and you keep saying no." Roy turned back to her, and something in his expression reminded Maya of her father. The kind of stubbornness that wasn't about pride, but about principle. "This land's been in my family since 1963. I'll die before I sell it to a man like him." Lily tugged on Maya's hand, and when Maya looked down, her daughter's eyes were fixed on something in the distance. The child's voice was small but clear. "Mama, is that really ours?" Maya followed her daughter's gaze. At the far edge of the lot, partially hidden behind a row of gutted pickup trucks entangled in thorny vines, sat an RV. Even from this distance, she could see the rust, the peeling paint, the flat tire. It looked dead, forgotten, the kind of thing that should have been crushed into a cube years ago. "If we work for it, baby." The words came out before Maya fully understood what she was agreeing to. But something about the shape of that RV, the way sunlight caught on its rounded corners, made her chest tighten with something that felt dangerously close to hope. Roy pulled a set of keys from his pocket, rust-red and heavy. "Bill Crawford left this here 31 years ago. Said it would pick its owner." He handed the keys to Maya, and they were warm from his hand, the metal rough against her palm. "Guess it picked you." Maya stared at the keys, then at the RV in the distance, then at Lily's upturned face. Her daughter's expression held something Maya hadn't seen in 6 months. Not quite a smile, but close. The edge of possibility. "Can we make it pretty?" Lily's voice was tentative, testing the words. "Like Grandpa's shop?" Maya's throat closed. She nodded because speaking was impossible. Roy cleared his throat. "Let me show you what you're getting into." They walked through the salvage yard in single file, Roy leading, Maya and Lily following. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the metal around them into a maze of heat sinks that radiated yesterday's temperature back at them. Maya noticed everything with a mechanic's eye. The organization of parts, the condition of the vehicles, the efficiency of the layout. This wasn't just a junkyard. This was someone's life's work, maintained with the kind of care that spoke to deeper purpose. The RV loomed larger as they approached. A 1987 Winnebago Chieftain, 27 feet of aluminum skin and broken dreams, paint peeled away like sunburned skin, revealing patches of bare metal underneath. One window was cracked in a spiderweb pattern. The tires had surrendered to time decades ago, flat and rotting. Vines had grown up the sides, nature's slow reclamation project. It looked like something that belonged in a horror movie. It looked like the kind of project that would break your heart and your back in equal measure. Maya loved it immediately, with an intensity that surprised her. There was something about the curve of its roof, the shape of its door, the way it sat tilted slightly to one side like a tired dog waiting for its owner to come home. It had stories. It had seen things. It was waiting to be loved again. Roy's voice was careful, the tone of someone delivering bad news gently. "Built in 1987. Been sitting here since December 1993. Owner couldn't bring himself to sell it or drive it, so he left it with me. Made me promise something strange." Maya ran her hand along the dusty siding, feeling the texture of oxidized aluminum and flaking paint. "What did he promise?" "That I'd wait for the right person. Someone who needed it as much as it needed them." Roy's eyes were distant, looking at something beyond the physical wreckage. "Bill Crawford was my friend. Good man. Lost his wife to cancer, never recovered. He believed broken things choose who fixes them." Before Maya could respond, Lily had climbed the rusted steps and was tugging at the door handle. The door resisted, swollen with age and moisture, but the child was persistent. Maya moved to help, and together they pulled. The door groaned open like a mouth that hadn't spoken in decades. The smell hit them first. Mildew and decay, the particular staleness of enclosed spaces left untouched for years. Dust hung in the air, visible in the shaft of sunlight that spilled through the doorway. Inside, curtains hung like torn rags. The dinette cushions were ripped open, foam spilling out like old guts. Water stains marked the ceiling in abstract patterns. The floor was hidden beneath debris, but Lily gasped, and when Maya looked at her daughter's face, she saw wonder instead of horror. The child pointed to the wall above the dinette bench, where something was carved into the wood paneling. The letters were rough, done by hand, the kind of permanence that took effort. To whoever finds this, you were meant to. WC 1993. Maya felt something shift in her chest. A message from a ghost. An invitation from the past. Roy stepped inside behind them, his weight making the RV rock slightly on its broken suspension. You should know what you're getting into. Engine seized, hasn't started in 15 years. Water damage throughout. Mold in the bathroom. Electrical systems completely dead. Plumbing's frozen. Probably burst pipes. Frame rails have rust through in at least 2 spots. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, flipped it open to a page covered in numbers. I estimate $8,000 to $10,000 in parts and 400 hours of labor to make this livable. Maybe 800 hours to make it roadworthy. The numbers should have been devastating. They were devastating. But Maya was already doing math in her head, the same calculations she'd been doing for months. Survival math. Desperation algebra. What's the actual deal? Roy met her eyes. $10 an hour, 40 hours a week. That's $400 a week gross, $1,600 a month. I deduct $300 for rent, $200 for utilities and meals. Leaves you $1,100 take home. He paused, letting her process. Parts for the RV, you pull from my inventory at cost. I estimate $3,000 to $4,000 in parts, and you can pay overtime or work extra hours at $15 an hour for skilled labor. 3 months minimum contract. RV becomes yours legally at the end if you complete the work. Maya's mind raced. 3 months would be $4,800 take home. Parts would be $3,000 minimum. She'd break even at best. But they'd have shelter, food, purpose, and at the end, ownership of something that was theirs. The alternative was continuing to live in the truck until it died completely. Then what? Homeless shelters that might separate her from Lily? Begging her siblings for help she couldn't bear to ask for? The street? What if I can't finish in 3 months? Then we extend. But you commit to finishing. This isn't a rental. Roy's voice was firm but not unkind. It's a restoration, and I need to know you won't quit halfway. Maya looked down at Lily, who was already exploring the RV despite its condition, her small hands touching the broken cabinets with a gentleness that made Maya's heart ache. Her daughter deserved better than this, deserved better than everything Maya had put her through, deserved a mother who could provide basic stability. Please, Mama. Lily's voice was so small, so hopeful. I want my own room. The words broke something in Maya that had been holding on by threads. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the single dollar bill she had left. It was wrinkled, soft from being folded and unfolded, the last physical proof that she had anything at all. She held it out to Roy. Down payment. Her voice didn't shake. I'll earn the rest. Roy looked at the dollar, then at her face, then gently pushed her hand back. Keep it. Buy your daughter an ice cream. She's earned it. Maya's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of this stranger who was offering her something impossible. A chance, an actual chance. Roy pulled out a clipboard and pen, official forms that made the arrangement real. They worked out the details standing in the dusty interior of a dead RV while Lily explored the back bedroom, her footsteps light and careful. Contract start date, pay schedule, inventory access, safety requirements. Roy explained his salvage yard operation with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times but never quite like this. You'll help me triage incoming vehicles, pull sellable parts, maintain inventory. I've got a computer system, but it's basic. Mostly I need someone with mechanical knowledge who can assess what's worth keeping and what's scrap. Maya nodded, already cataloging the visible inventory in her mind. Years of running a shop had trained her to see patterns, to know which parts were in demand and which would sit forever. Roy handed her the clipboard, and she signed her name, the pen scratching across paper with a sound like commitment. Maya Elena Torres. The signature looked strange, unmoored from the context of all the other documents she'd signed in the last year. Divorce papers, bank foreclosures, medical debt acknowledgments. This was different. This was forward motion instead of freefall. When it was done, Roy handed her a key ring with 3 keys. Office, bathroom, and this. He nodded at the RV. Welcome to Bishop's Salvage. The rest of the morning blurred into practicalities. Roy showed her the inventory system, rows of vehicles organized by year, make, and model. He explained his pricing structure, his customer base, his suppliers. He pointed out the bathroom and break room, small structures at the edge of the yard with questionable plumbing, but functional enough. He gave her a safety vest, work gloves, and a clipboard for taking notes. And through it all, Maya felt Lily's hand in hers, small and trusting, and the weight of the RV keys in her pocket, and the impossible reality that they had somewhere to be. Not just to stay, but to build. By lunch, Roy had set them up with sandwiches from a deli in town and lemonade cold enough to hurt going down. They ate in the shade of the office overhang while Roy explained the filing system and showed Maya how to process customer orders. His movements were efficient, practiced, the kind of competence that came from decades of doing the same tasks well. Lily fell asleep in a chair inside the air-conditioned office, exhaustion catching up with her. Maya watched her daughter's chest rise and fall, the child's face finally peaceful, and felt the first loosening of the knot that had lived in her chest for months. Not gone, but looser. Roy followed her gaze. She's a good kid. She deserves better than this. Better than a fresh start? Roy's tone was mild but pointed. Better than watching her mama rebuild something from nothing? Kids don't need perfect. They need present. The words landed hard. Maya had been so focused on everything she'd lost that she hadn't considered what Lily might be gaining. The chance to see her mother fight instead of flee. To watch something broken become whole again. To learn that failure wasn't fatal. That afternoon, Maya started her real education. Roy walked her through the yard, explaining his system. Vehicles arrived through various channels: auctions, private sales, insurance totals, abandoned property. Each one needed assessment. Viable parts were cataloged and stored. Unsalvageable hulks were crushed and sold for scrap metal. The economics were simple, but the execution required knowledge, and Roy had both. A customer arrived around 3, looking for an alternator for a 1998 Ford F-150. Roy started to check his computer, but Maya was already moving, her feet carrying her down row 7 to the third truck from the left. Still attached, $45. The customer stared at her. How did you... I remember engines. Maya didn't elaborate, didn't mention the hundreds of F-150s she'd worked on at Torres Auto Repair, the way she'd trained herself to memorize inventory because her shop was too small for a sophisticated system. Some skills you didn't lose even when you lost everything else. Roy raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The customer paid cash and left happy. After he'd gone, Roy turned to Maya with something like respect in his eyes. You got photographic memory? Only for things that matter. That night, after Roy left and the salvage yard went quiet, Maya and Lily tackled the RV. They started with the obvious: garbage removal. 6 industrial trash bags filled with debris, shredded insulation, dead rodent nests, mysteriously sticky substances that neither of them wanted to identify. Lily worked with surprising determination, wearing adult work gloves that went halfway up her forearms, her small face serious with concentration. They found artifacts: a rusted Coleman stove, a pair of tiny sneakers, size 2T, the rubber crumbling, melted crayons in a cup holder, a fossilized French fry under the driver's seat that might have been archaeologically significant. Each discovery felt like a glimpse into lives lived here, a family that had called this metal box home. Maya worked until her back screamed and her bandaged hand throbbed. The physical labor was brutal but clarifying. Every bag of trash removed was visible progress. Every cleared surface was proof of forward motion. She'd forgotten what it felt like to see the results of her work immediately, to measure achievement in square feet instead of customer satisfaction surveys. When they finally stopped, well after dark, the RV's interior was still a disaster, but it was a clean disaster. The bones of the space were visible now, and Maya could start to see possibility where before she'd only seen decay. Roy appeared with dinner: chili in styrofoam containers, cornbread wrapped in foil, lemonade in plastic bottles. He set them on a card table outside the RV, without comment, then joined them as they ate. The food was simple, but it was hot, and there was enough, and Maya hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first spoonful hit her stomach. Lily fell asleep almost immediately after eating, curled up in her sleeping bag on what used to be the dinette bench. Maya covered her with a thin blanket and stood in the doorway, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall in the rhythm of deep sleep. Roy handed her a battery-powered lantern. "You did good work today. It's just cleaning. Nothing's just anything." Roy's voice was quiet but firm. "You showed up. You didn't quit when you saw how bad it was. That's more than most people would do." Maya didn't trust herself to respond. The kindness was almost harder to bear than the struggle had been. She'd armored herself against cruelty, but gentleness found all the cracks. They sat in silence for a while, the desert night, vistas and stars scattered above them. Finally, Roy spoke again. "Bill Crawford was my friend, known him since 1982. Good man, good father. Lost his wife Helen to cancer in '93. Never recovered. Why didn't he sell the RV? Tried 3 times. Each time he'd sit in it for an hour, then drive it back." Said Helen's voice was still in the walls. "That's sad." Roy nodded, "But it's also love." After he left, Maya sat alone outside the RV, the desert cooling rapidly around her. She pulled out the envelope from the dashboard of the truck, Sophia's handwriting accusatory in the lantern light. Her finger traced the word urgent, the red stamp that demanded attention she couldn't give. Not yet. She wasn't ready for whatever truth was inside. Instead, she climbed into the RV, carefully stepping over Lily's sleeping form, and opened the glove compartment. It was jammed, swollen with age and moisture. Maya pried it open with her bandaged hand, ignoring the spike of pain. Inside was a leather logbook, weathered but surprisingly well preserved. She opened it carefully. The first pages were maintenance records. Oil changes, tire rotations, part replacements. Methodical, detailed, the handwriting precise. Trip logs followed, documenting journeys across the country with dates and mileage, and small observations. Lost a tire in New Mexico, laughed for hours. Jenna's first fish, Lake Tahoe, huge smile. Desert sunset, Helen cried at the beauty. The entry stopped in December 1993, but on the last page, in shakier handwriting, was a message. Maya read it by lantern light, Lily's soft breathing, the only other sound in the world. "This is my final entry. Helen passed 3 months ago. I can't drive this anymore. Every mile without her feels wrong. I'm leaving this at Roy Bishop's yard. He's a good man. He promised me something I need to believe, that broken things find the right people. To whoever ends up with this RV, you weren't random. You were meant for this. Helen used to say broken things choose who fixes them. There's something hidden in this RV, something I couldn't finish because grief took me. If you find it, you'll understand everything. Look where Helen used to sit. Look where she watched the sunsets. That's where the truth is. Don't give up on this old girl, and don't give up on yourself." Bill Crawford, December 15th, 1993. Maya read the message 3 times. Her hands were shaking by the third pass. A message from a ghost. Instructions from the past. A promise that she was meant to be here. That this wreckage had chosen her as surely as she'd chosen it. She looked around the stripped interior, at the water-stained walls and broken fixtures and 31 years of abandonment. Looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. Looked at her own bandaged hands, scarred and capable. Where Helen used to sit, the passenger side. Where wives sat on long road trips, watching the world scroll past, navigating not just roads but life itself. Tomorrow she would look. Tonight she would rest. Maya lay down on the floor beside Lily's bench, her body aching in ways that felt earned rather than inflicted. Through the cracked window she could see stars, countless and indifferent. Somewhere under this same sky, her father had died thinking she'd given up. Her siblings were living lives she'd exiled herself from. The shop that had been her identity was owned by strangers now. But here, in this broken shell of someone else's dreams, she had a key and a contract in 3 months to prove that broken things could be made whole. Her last thought before sleep took her was a whisper to the ghost of Bill Crawford and his Helen, to her own lost parents, to whatever force had led her to this salvage yard in the middle of nowhere, Arizona. "I'll finish what you started. I promise." The stars made no answer, but the promise was made. And Maya Torres, who had broken every other promise she'd made to herself in the last 2 years, would keep this one. She had to. It was all she had left. Dawn came too early and brought Roy Bishop with it. Maya woke to the sound of boots on gravel, her body screaming protest from sleeping on bare plywood. Lily was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the dinette bench and staring at the carved message on the wall with the kind of focus children reserve for mysteries. Roy appeared in the doorway holding 3 coffee cups balanced in a cardboard carrier in a paper bag that smelled like salvation. Thought you could use breakfast before we start. The coffee was black and bitter and perfect. The bag held breakfast burritos, still warm from whatever gas station Roy had stopped at on his way in. Maya and Lily ate standing up because sitting down meant acknowledging how much her back hurt. And acknowledgement felt like weakness she couldn't afford. Roy pulled out a folder thick with papers. Before we get into the real work, you need to understand what you're dealing with. This is every piece of documentation I have on the Winnebago. Purchase records, insurance papers, registration history. And these are Bill Crawford's personal notes. He spread the papers across the hood of a nearby junked sedan, creating an impromptu desk. The registration showed the RV had been purchased new in April 1984 by William and Helen Crawford of Sedona, Arizona. $23,000, financed through a credit union. The insurance papers tracked annual renewals until 1990, when coverage lapsed. Maintenance records showed oil changes every 3,000 miles like clockwork, tire rotations, brake pad replacements. Someone had loved this machine with the kind of attention that bordered on devotion. Bill kept notes on everything. Roy's finger traced down a page of handwritten observations. Electrical issues in '89, needed new converter, water pump replaced in '91. He even documented which campgrounds had the best sunsets. Lily peered at the papers, her small finger landing on a photograph tucked between insurance forms. A family of 4 stood in front of the RV when it was new, chrome gleaming, paint unmarred. The father wore thick-rimmed glasses and a smile that reached his eyes. The mother had a sunflower tucked behind her ear. 2 children, maybe 6 and 4, clutched popsicles and wore matching sunburned grins. They looked happy. Lily's voice was wistful. They were. Roy's expression softened. Tommy and Lisa, they're kids. Good people. Haven't seen them in decades. Maya studied the photograph, committing faces to memory. These strangers had built a life in 27 feet of aluminum, had loved each other enough that losing one broke the other beyond repair, had left behind a mystery for whoever came next. The morning blurred into inventory training. Roy's system was more sophisticated than Maya had assumed. Every vehicle that came through the gate got photographed from multiple angles. VIN recorded, major components assessed. Sellable parts were cataloged with location codes. Pricing based on condition and demand. The computer system was outdated but functional, and Roy walked her through customer order processing with the patience of someone who'd explained it before and would explain it again. A tow truck arrived mid-morning hauling a 2004 Honda Accord, front end crushed from what looked like a head-on collision. The driver dropped it in the intake area and handed Roy paperwork. Insurance total, owner walked away. Roy signed forms, and the truck disappeared back toward town. This is your first assessment, Roy gestured at the Accord. Tell me what's worth keeping. Maya walked a slow circle around the vehicle, her trained eye cataloging damage and potential. The front was destroyed, radiator pushed back into the engine block, but that was expected. She opened the driver's door, noting the intact interior, popped the hood, which required force because the frame was bent. The engine was likely damaged beyond use, but peripheral components looked viable. Rear axle assembly, transmission if we're lucky, all 4 doors, interior panels, seats, electronics if the impact didn't surge the system, wheels and tires, catalytic converter, exhaust system from the midpoint back. She paused, thinking. Headlights are gone, but taillights are intact. Suspension components from the rear. Probably 800 to 1,000 in sellable parts if we move them in the next month. Roy's weathered face creased into approval. You weren't kidding about the mechanical memory. They spent 2 hours pulling parts, Roy teaching her his extraction techniques, while Lily played in the shade with a set of plastic wrenches Roy had found for her. The work was hot and demanding but familiar. muscle memory from years in the shop taking over. Maya's bandaged hand throbbed, but she worked through it, proving something to Roy or herself or both. Lunch was sandwiches again, eaten in the air-conditioned office while Lily napped on a worn couch. Roy pulled up his computer, showing Maya the inventory database and how to update it. You learn fast. Had good teachers. Maya didn't elaborate, didn't mention her grandfather's patient instruction or her father's exacting standards. Those memories lived too close to the surface, sharp enough to cut. Roy leaned back in his chair, studying her with eyes that had seen too much of life to be fooled by surface presentations. You gonna tell me what you're running from? I'm not running. The lie tasted like copper. Everyone who shows up here with nothing is running. Question is whether they're running from something or towards something. Roy's voice was gentle but implacable. Bill Crawford was running from grief. Couldn't outrun it, so he left the RV here and walked away. You strike me as someone running from shame. Maya's throat closed. She looked at Lily sleeping peacefully, small chest rising and falling, face relaxed in a way it never was when awake. I lost everything my family built. Lost it because I wasn't good enough, smart enough, strong enough to save it. That's not shame. That's fact. Shame is thinking the loss defines you. Roy stood, refilling his coffee from a pot that looked older than Maya. Facts are just data points. What you do next is what defines you. Before Maya could respond, the sound of an expensive engine cut through the afternoon heat. The black Mercedes appeared at the gate, and Maya's stomach tightened with instinctive wariness. Richard Caldwell emerged looking even more polished than yesterday, his suit unwrinkled despite the heat. He approached the office with the confidence of someone who'd never encountered a door that stayed closed to him. Roy stepped outside, positioning himself between Caldwell and the office door. Thought I told you to stay off my property. This is business, not personal. Caldwell pulled an envelope from his jacket. I'm raising my offer to $900,000. That's well above market value, Roy. You'd be a fool not to take it. Then I'm a fool. Roy didn't touch the envelope. Caldwell's expression hardened. Through the office window, Maya watched the shift happen, the polished veneer cracking to reveal something calculating underneath. I've been patient out of respect for your late father, but patience has limits. Is that a threat? It's reality. This yard doesn't meet current environmental standards. One complaint to the EPA and you'll spend the next decade in litigation. One call to the health department about those bathroom facilities. One inspection of your electrical systems. I could make your life very difficult, very expensive. Roy's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. You threaten me again, and I'll have the sheriff remove you. This is private property and you're trespassing. Caldwell's gaze shifted, landing on Maya through the window. His eyes narrowed, recognition sparking. That woman, the one with the child. Does CPS know she's living in a junkyard? Does the county know you're providing substandard housing? Maya's blood turned to ice. Lily was still sleeping, oblivious, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Her hands clenched into fists, the bandaged one sending spikes of pain up her arm. Roy took a step forward, and despite being smaller, despite being older, something about his posture made Caldwell step back. You're done here. Leave now or I call the sheriff and press harassment charges. For a moment, the tableau held. Then Caldwell smiled, the expression containing no warmth at all. 30 days, Roy. I'll give you 30 days to reconsider. After that, I stop asking nicely. He climbed back into his Mercedes and drove away, gravel spitting under expensive tires. Roy stood watching until the dust settled. When he turned back to the office, his face was grim. I'm sorry you got pulled into that. Maya's voice shook despite her efforts to control it. Can he really call CPS? Can he take her? He can call. Doesn't mean they'll do anything. You're employed. You have shelter. She's fed and safe. Roy's certainty was meant to be reassuring, but Maya heard the uncertainty underneath. We just need to make damn sure everything is above board. Clean living space, proper facilities, no safety violations. That night, after Roy left, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay on the plywood floor, staring at the water-stained ceiling, playing out scenarios in her head. CPS investigations, Lily being placed in foster care while Maya proved herself fit. The system that was supposed to protect children, used as a weapon by a man who wanted land for condos. The envelope from Sophia sat on the makeshift shelf Maya had created from a plastic crate. 3 days it had been there. 3 days of avoidance. But Caldwell's threats had shifted something, broken through the denial that let her pretend the past wasn't catching up. She picked up the envelope with shaking hands. The paper was soft from handling, Sophia's handwriting achingly familiar. Maya could remember her sister forming letters at the kitchen table, tongue between teeth in concentration, the careful loops and crosses of someone who took pride in presentation. The glue gave easily. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Sophia's handwriting smaller than the envelope, cramped as if she'd been trying to fit too much into too little space. Maya, I don't know where you are. Daniel won't tell me if he even knows. Dad collapsed 2 weeks ago, congestive heart failure stage 4. He's in ICU at Phoenix Memorial. The doctors say days, maybe a week. He keeps asking for you, not angry, just sad. Yesterday he asked Daniel, did I fail her? Did I push her too hard? Daniel lied and said you were working out of state. Dad nodded, but I could see he knew. Please, Maya. Even if you can't forgive yourself, give him a chance to see you one more time. I love you. Lily needs her mom, and Dad needs his daughter. Come home. Sophia. The date at the top was 6 weeks old, 6 weeks. Her father had been dying and she'd been driving aimlessly through Arizona with her daughter. Too proud or too ashamed or too broken to check messages, to open mail, to face the family she'd failed. Maya's hands went numb. The letter dropped to the floor. She stood abruptly, her body moving without conscious direction, out of the RV and into the desert night. The cool air hit her face but didn't register. She walked until the salvage yard was 50 yards behind her, until the scattered metal caught moonlight in patterns like fallen stars. Then she screamed. Not words, just sound, raw and animal and full of every failure that had brought her to this moment. She screamed until her throat was raw, until her lungs burned, until the desert absorbed her rage and gave nothing back. When she finally stopped, breath coming in ragged gasps, the silence was absolute. No traffic sounds, no human voices, just wind and the distant cry of a coyote, and the vast indifference of a landscape that had witnessed civilizations rise and fall and would witness countless more. She sat down in the dirt, knees pulled to chest, and let herself break. Not the clean break of earlier, but something messier. Guilt and grief and shame mixing together until she couldn't distinguish individual emotions. Just a tide of loss that threatened to pull her under. Her father was dead, had been dead for 3 weeks, had died asking about her, worried about her, probably disappointed in her. The last of her parents gone, and she hadn't been there, hadn't held his hand, hadn't told him she was sorry for failing, for losing the shop, for becoming exactly the kind of person who disappeared when things got hard. Time became elastic. She might have sat there for minutes or hours. Eventually she heard footsteps, soft and careful. Roy appeared, holding the letter he must have found on the RV floor. He sat down beside her without speaking, the two of them silent witnesses to each other's pain. Finally his voice came, rough with emotion. My wife Margaret died 3 years ago, heart attack, sudden. I was in town when it happened. By the time I got home, she was gone. Last thing I said to her that morning was that I'd be late for dinner because I had inventory to finish. Not, I love you, not you mean everything to me, just that I'd be late. Maya turned to look at him, seeing the grief carved into the lines of his face. You think you'll get another chance to say the important things? Then you don't, and you carry that weight forever. Roy's eyes were distant. But Maya, the weight doesn't define you. What you do while carrying it, that's what matters. My father died thinking I gave up. Maybe. Roy's voice was gentle. Or maybe he died knowing you were strong enough to rebuild. You don't know what he thought. You only know what you think he thought. The distinction was subtle but profound. Maya had been carrying an assumption, treating it as fact, but she didn't know, couldn't know, would never know. I can't call them, can't face Daniel and Sophia, not yet. Roy stood, offering a hand to pull her up. Then don't. But you will eventually, because that weight will get heavier the longer you carry it alone. They walked back to the salvage yard in silence. At the RV, Roy paused. Tomorrow we start the real work on this thing. You up for it? Maya looked at the rusted shell, at the carved message visible through the open door, at Lily sleeping peacefully inside. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Roy's voice was firm. You could walk away right now. Take your daughter, go back to Phoenix, ask your siblings for help. But you won't. You know why? Because I'm stubborn. Because you're a builder. And builders don't walk away from projects just because they're hard. After he left, Maya climbed back into the RV. She sat at the dinette bench, running her fingers over the carved words. You were meant to. Bill Crawford's message from 31 years ago. A promise or a prophecy or both. Look where Helen used to sit. The passenger side dinette bench. Maya had cleared it that first night, removed the torn cushions, and scraped away layers of mouse nest and decay. But she hadn't looked underneath. Hadn't thought to. She grabbed the battery lantern and examined the bench more carefully. The seat was mounted to the wall, appearing solid, but when she pushed on it, there was slight give. She ran her fingers along the edges, finding a seam almost invisible under decades of grime. It took 10 minutes of careful work with her father's old wrench to find the hidden latches. When they released, the entire bench seat lifted like a lid, revealing a compartment 6 inches deep. Inside was a hard plastic case, the kind designed to protect contents from water and impact. Maya's hands shook as she pulled it out, the case heavier than expected. She set it on the dinette table and opened the latches. A leather photo album lay on top, its cover embossed with the words, Our Adventures. Beneath it, wrapped in protective plastic, was a VHS tape labeled for Helen, Our Life Together. A stack of laminated maintenance logs, and beneath everything, a small leather journal. Maya opened the photo album with reverence, as if handling something sacred. The first page held a photograph of the family from the registration papers, but younger, standing in front of a dealership. The RV behind them gleamed new, chrome sparkling in sunlight. Bill Crawford's arm was around Helen's shoulders. Their children, maybe 6 and 4, bounced with barely contained excitement. The caption underneath in careful handwriting, April 1984, Our Dream Machine. Here we go. Page after page documented a life. Yellowstone. The kids posed in front of Old Faithful. Grand Canyon. The family tiny against vastness. Sequoia National Park. Helen and Bill dwarfed by trees that had been ancient when this country was young. Mount Rushmore. Tommy making faces at the camera while Lisa looked serious. The Oregon coast, all 4 of them building sandcastles that the tide would erase. Lake Tahoe, a fish almost as big as Tommy's torso. Campgrounds across America, each one marked with dates and small observations. Tommy lost a tooth here. Lisa's first time swimming. Best sunset we ever saw. Bill's birthday, 1987. Helen made a cake in the RV oven. The photos showed time passing. The children grew taller, their baby faces sharpening into the angles of adolescence. The RV showed wear, small dings and scratches that spoke to thousands of miles. But the smiles never changed. In every photograph, the family radiated joy, the particular happiness of people who'd found something rare and precious and were conscious of their luck. Then, around 1992, the photos shifted. Helen looked thinner, wearing headscarves and patterns that couldn't quite hide their medical purpose. The children were older, teenagers now, their smiles more strained. Fewer photos, longer gaps between dates. The joy was still there but shadowed, the way sunlight looks different through storm clouds. The second-to-last photo showed Helen and Bill alone, sitting on the RV steps with an Arizona sunset behind them. Helen was gaunt, the scarf covering complete hair loss. But she was smiling, and Bill's expression held such tenderness that Maya had to look away. The caption, September 1993, last trip together, Sedona. She made me promise to keep going. I couldn't keep it. Bill, the final page held a funeral program. Helen Marie Crawford, 1953-93, beloved wife, mother. Life is measured in miles traveled together. Lily stirred in her sleep, making small sounds. Maya set the album down carefully and moved to check on her daughter, tucking the thin blanket more securely around small shoulders. The child's face was peaceful, unmarked by the knowledge of how much could be lost. Maya returned to the table and opened Bill's journal. The entry started in March 1993 after Helen's death and chronicled a man falling apart. The early entries were clinical, documenting attempts to maintain normalcy. Tried to drive to the Grand Canyon today. Made it 10 miles before I had to pull over. Kept expecting to hear her tell me to slow down. Turned around. As the months progressed, the entries became more raw. How do you move on from someone who was your life? The house is too quiet. I sleep in the RV most nights. At least here I can still smell her perfume in the curtains. By November, desperation colored every word. Tommy thinks I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But I can't sell this RV. Every dealer's offer feels like erasing her. I took it to 3 different lots. Sat in the parking lot for hours each time. Drove it home. Helen's voice keeps saying it will find the right person. The final entry was dated December 15th, 1993. This is it. I'm leaving everything tomorrow. Tommy and Lisa think I should sell, use the money for something practical. They don't understand. This RV isn't about money. It carried our family's laughter. It held Helen's last happy memories before the sickness stole everything else. I can't let it rot, but I can't restore it either. Grief has taken that from me, so I'm hiding something. A treasure. Not money, something better. Truth, legacy, proof that love survives death. Instructions for finder. Look deeper than the floor. Look in the walls. Look where structure meets story. You'll find the final piece. And when you do, finish what I started. Make this place live again. Fill it with new laughter. That's all Helen ever wanted. If you're reading this, you were chosen, not by me, by something bigger. Good luck, and thank you. William Crawford. Maya read the entry 3 times, memorizing every word. Look in the walls, where structure meets story. Another mystery, another layer. Bill Crawford had hidden something else, something he considered more valuable than money. She wanted to start searching immediately, to tear into walls and find whatever secrets they held. But exhaustion was a physical weight, and her bandaged hand throbbed with a pain that suggested infection. Tomorrow, she would search tomorrow. She placed the journal back in the case with the album and tape, then closed it carefully. These weren't her memories, but they were her inheritance. A family's love distilled into images and words, left for a stranger who needed proof that broken things could heal. Sleep came eventually, troubled and thin. Maya dreamed of her father in the hospital, asking for her while she drove past exit after exit, unable to stop. Dreamed of her mother's shop sign being dismantled letter by letter until only shadows remained. Dreamed of Lily growing up in the cab of a truck, becoming smaller and quieter until she disappeared entirely. She woke before dawn, body aching, mind already cataloging the day's tasks. But when she opened her eyes, Lily was awake too, sitting at the dinette and looking at the photo album Maya had left out. They had a little girl like me. Lily's finger traced the image of young Lisa Crawford. Do you think she was happy? Maya pulled herself up, joints protesting. I think she had parents who loved her very much. Where is she now? I don't know, baby. Grown up somewhere. Living her life. Lily closed the album carefully, her small hands reverent. When we fix this place, can we put our pictures next to theirs? The question punched through Maya's chest. The idea that her daughter could imagine a future worth documenting, worth remembering, worth celebrating. That this child who'd spent months sleeping in a truck could look at these strangers' happiness and want to create her own. Yeah, baby, we can do that. Roy arrived earlier than usual, his truck rumbling through the gate as the sun painted the sky pink and orange. He brought breakfast again, this time egg sandwiches and orange juice, the kind of simple kindness that was becoming routine. Over coffee, Maya showed him what she'd found. Roy held the photo album with careful hands, his weathered face softening as he paged through. I remember when they bought this thing. Bill was so proud, saved for 3 years to afford it. He reached the photos from the final years, Helen in headscarves, and his expression clouded. Cancer's a bastard. Took my Margaret the same way, though faster. 3 months from diagnosis to gone. Bill at least got time, though I'm not sure that's better. Did you know Helen? Some sweet woman made Bill laugh. She was the one who convinced him to buy the RV in the first place. Said life was too short to wait for perfect timing. Maya thought about perfect timing, about all the moments she'd waited for conditions to align, waiting to expand the shop until they had more capital, waiting to take Lily on trips until business was stable, waiting to call her siblings until she had good news to share. All that waiting and time had run out anyway. Bill wrote that he hid something else, in the walls. Roy's eyebrows rose. You planning to tear the place apart? If I have to, let's try the smart way first. Roy stood, brushing crumbs from his overalls. RVs from this era had common modifications. False walls for extra storage. Hidden compartments for valuables. Bill was smart. He'd have used existing structure. They spent the morning mapping the RV's interior, measuring walls against exterior dimensions, looking for inconsistencies. Modern RVs had thinner walls, more efficient use of space, but 1980s models were built with thicker panels and more wood frame. Plenty of room for secrets. Lily helped, her small hands useful for reaching into tight spaces. She found a loose panel behind the bathroom sink, but it was just plumbing access. Maya discovered a gap behind the closet wall, but it was empty except for mouse droppings and insulation. By noon, they'd checked everything obvious. Roy leaned against the counter thinking, where structure meets story. Bill was poetic like that. What's the story of an RV? Travel. Adventure. Maya wiped sweat from her forehead. Family time. And where does that happen? The driving, the navigation. Roy's eyes lit up. Helen used to sit passenger side, right? That was her spot. She'd navigate, handle the maps, watch the scenery. Behind the driver's seat, Maya was already moving, where Bill steered their adventures. The wall behind the driver's seat appeared solid, covered in the same wood paneling as the rest of the interior. But when Maya tapped it, one section sounded hollow. She ran her fingers along the seams, finding a panel that fit so precisely it was nearly invisible. It took careful work with a utility knife to cut through 31 years of paint and grime sealing the edges. When the panel finally came free, it revealed a cavity 6 inches deep. Inside was a Tupperware container, sealed with duct tape that had somehow maintained its stick through decades. Maya's hands shook as she pulled it out, the plastic surprisingly intact. The container held 4 items. A small wooden box, hand-carved with mountain scenes that showed incredible detail and patience. A gold ring, simple band worn smooth with years of wear. 5 letters tied together with string, the paper yellowed but the ink still legible. And another letter folded separately addressed, "To whoever finds this." Maya opened the separate letter first, spreading it on the dinette table. Roy and Lily crowded close, all 3 reading together. "To whoever finds this, I hid this on December 14th, 1993, day before I left the ARV for the last time. Why hide my wife's ring and letters? Because I couldn't keep them where I'd see them. Too painful. But I couldn't throw them away. And I couldn't give them to my kids. They had their own grief. These letters saved my life during Helen's final months. Every word reminded me, love doesn't end. It transforms. If you found this, you've done what I couldn't. You brought this place back to life. The ring is yours now, not to wear, but to remember. Someone loved deeply here. Someone built a life in 27 feet of metal and dreams. The VHS tape, I made it for Helen in hospice. A montage of our life together. She died 2 days before I finished it. I've never watched it. Couldn't bear to. If you have the courage I lacked, watch it. See what this place meant. Then fill it with your own story. You were meant to find this. Helen used to say the universe puts people where they need to be. I didn't believe her then. I do now. Thank you for caring. Bill Crawford. Maya picked up the wooden box, feeling the weight of craftsmanship and care. The mountain scene on the lid was intricate, each peak and valley carved with precision. She opened it slowly. The velvet lining inside was faded but intact, cradling Helen's ring like something precious. The ring itself was simple. Gold band, no stones, worn thin in places from decades of wear. Maya held it up to the light, seeing the engraving inside. H+B, forever, 1969. 24 years they'd had. 24 years of forever, and then Helen was gone and Bill couldn't figure out how to keep going. But he'd kept going long enough to leave this, to create a treasure hunt for strangers, to believe that his grief might someday help someone else's healing. Lily reached out tentatively. Can I see? Maya placed the ring in her daughter's palm, the gold bright against small skin. Lily examined it with the seriousness children bring to important things. It's pretty. Simple pretty. The best kind. Roy's voice was thick with emotion. Maya turned to the bundle of letters, 5 envelopes tied with string that had somehow not rotted. She untied them carefully, spreading them on the table in chronological order based on the dates written in the corners. February through August 1993. Helen's final months, documented in her own words. She opened the first letter, dated February 12, 1993. My dearest Bill, the doctors say 6 to 8 months. I say we've had 24 years, and that's more than most people dream of. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of you forgetting how to live. Promise me something. When I'm gone, don't mourn me in this RV. Take her back on the road. Fill her with new laughter. She's not a tomb. She's a vessel for joy. Remember that. I love you more than words. You're Helen. The second letter, dated March, described chemotherapy with unflinching honesty. The nausea, the exhaustion, the way her body was betraying her. But even in illness, Helen's voice came through with warmth and humor. She wrote about wanting to see the Grand Canyon one more time, about small joys like birds at the window, and Bill's terrible jokes that made her laugh despite everything. May's letter was shorter, weakness evident in shakier handwriting. She wrote about acceptance, about making peace with endings, about gratitude for every mile they traveled together. She thanked Bill for loving her when she was bald and broken, for holding her hand through the worst of it, for never once making her feel like a burden. July's letter made Maya's throat close. Helen writing about wanting Bill to find happiness again someday, to remarry if he met someone who made him smile, promising that she wouldn't be jealous, that love wasn't diminished by being shared. Bill never had remarried, had never even tried, as far as Roy knew. The final letter was dated August 15, 1993, 1 week before Helen died, according to the funeral program. The handwriting was barely legible, letters wandering across the page as if written by someone whose strength was fading with every word. My love, this is my last letter. I can barely hold the pen. You gave me the world in 27 feet. Every mile was an adventure because you were driving. Our children are strong. They'll be okay. You, I worry about you. You love too deeply. That's why I loved you. When I'm gone, let this RV go. She deserves to carry new stories. You deserve to make new memories. Don't let grief kill you like it's killing me. I'll wait for you on the other side. But don't rush. Live first. Thank you for 24 years. Thank you for Tommy and Lisa. Thank you for loving me when I was bald and broken. You are my forever. Helen. Maya folded the letter carefully, her vision blurred. These weren't her memories, weren't her grief, but the weight of someone else's love story pressed against her chest until breathing hurt. Bill had carried these letters for months after Helen died, reading her words, feeling her presence in ink and paper. Then he'd hidden them here, unable to keep them close but unable to let them go. She understood that impulse. The envelope from Sophia was still in the RV, read but not responded to. Some truths were easier to hold at arm's length. Lily had been quiet through the reading, her young face serious. The mommy really loved the daddy. Yes, she did. Like you loved Grandpa Roberto? The question caught Maya unprepared. She thought about her father, about the complicated tangle of love and expectation and disappointment that had defined their relationship, about how she'd run from his hospital bed, too ashamed of her failures to face him, about how he'd died asking if he'd failed her, when really she'd been the one who'd failed him. Yeah, baby, like that. Roy cleared his throat, buying Maya time to collect herself. These are treasures, Maya, real ones, not the kind you sell, the kind you honor. I know. Maya placed the letters back in the wooden box with Helen's ring, arranging them carefully. Bill wanted whoever found this to finish what he started, to make this place live again. You planning to? The question hung in the desert air. Maya looked around the RV's stripped interior at the water stains and rot and decades of abandonment. Looked at Lily, who was examining the carved wooden box with reverent fingers. Looked at her own bandaged hand, at the calluses that marked her as someone who built things, fixed things, made things whole. I don't know how to do anything else. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of sweat, discovery, and slow transformation. Maya attacked the RV with the intensity of someone who understood that stopping meant drowning. Each morning she woke before dawn, body protesting the previous day's labor, and began again. Stripping walls, pulling out rotted subfloor, cataloging every failure of time and neglect. Roy taught her welding on her second week. They set up equipment behind the RV, and Maya learned to strike an arc, to maintain distance, to create beads that held metal to metal with the kind of permanence that felt like promise. Her first welds were ugly, spattered, and inconsistent, but Roy just nodded and handed her more scrap to practice on. Structure doesn't care about pretty, it cares about strong. The frame rails needed reinforcement where rust had eaten through. Maya cut steel plates from salvaged material, fit them precisely, welded them into place. The work was slow and demanding, requiring concentration that left no room for the thoughts that ambushed her in quiet moments. Thoughts about her father dying alone, about Sophia and Daniel moving through their lives while she hid in a junkyard, about all the ways she'd proven herself to be exactly as weak as she'd feared. Lily became Roy's shadow when Maya was deep in technical work. The child followed him through the salvage yard, learning the names of parts and tools, absorbing the kind of practical knowledge that schools didn't teach. Roy was patient with her questions, explaining how engines worked, why certain metals corroded faster than others, which cars were built to last and which were designed to fail. One afternoon, Maya looked up from welding to see her daughter standing on a step stool beside Roy, both of them bent over a carburetor, and something in her chest loosened. Lily was learning, growing, becoming someone who understood that broken things could be fixed with enough knowledge and effort. The phone call came on day 19. Maya was reinstalling the subfloor, marine-grade plywood cut to fit and sealed against moisture, when Roy appeared in the doorway looking uncomfortable. "Your sister called the office number. Said she'd try your cell but figured you didn't have one anymore. She's right, isn't she?" Maya's hands stilled on the drill. "What did she say? That your brother's coming? Tomorrow. Didn't ask, just inform me." Roy's expression was carefully neutral. "You want me to tell him you're not here?" The temptation was enormous. To avoid the confrontation, the judgment, the reality of family that had moved forward while she'd been treading water. But Lily was watching from the dinette bench, her young face anxious in the way children got when adults tried to hide important things. "No, let him come." That night, Maya worked until exhaustion made her clumsy, until her bandaged hand throbbed with a pain that suggested she should probably see a doctor but definitely wouldn't. She installed the last section of subfloor, screwed it down with the kind of precision that would outlast her lifetime. Then she sat on the new floor and let herself imagine the conversation with Daniel. All the ways he'd be right about her failures. All the ways she'd have no defense. Lily fell asleep against her shoulder, small body warm and trusting. Maya carried her daughter to the sleeping bag they shared, tucked her in, then stepped outside into the desert night. The stars were infinite overhead, indifferent to human drama. She thought about Helen Crawford watching these same stars from the same spot, knowing death was coming, writing letters to the man she loved. Helen had faced her ending with grace and clarity. Maya couldn't even face her brother. The silver Honda Accord appeared just after lunch the next day. Maya watched it approach through the RV's window, her stomach knotting with anxiety that felt physical. Daniel emerged looking exactly like she remembered, pressed khakis and a polo shirt, shoes too clean for a salvage yard. His face when he saw her was complicated, relief and anger mixing into something she couldn't name. Lily ran to him before Maya could intercept. "Uncle Danny!" Daniel picked up his niece, his expression softening as he held her. "Hey, Ladybug, you gotten taller?" Maya forced herself to walk outside to meet his gaze directly despite wanting to look anywhere else. Her hands were black with grease, her clothes stained with welding spatter, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that hadn't seen a brush in days. She looked like what she was, someone surviving at the edges. "Sophia told me where you were." Daniel's voice was carefully controlled. "Living in a junkyard, restoring an RV, working, earning a living." Maya heard the defensiveness in her own voice, hated it. Daniel set Lily down gently, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. "Dad's funeral was 3 weeks ago. You didn't even call until after he was gone." The words landed like physical blows. Maya's chest tightened, but she forced herself to stay standing, to take what she deserved. "I didn't know." Because you disappeared. Daniel's control cracked slightly. We thought you were dead, Maya. Dead. Do you understand what that did to us, to Sophia? She cried herself sick trying to find you. I'm sorry. The words were inadequate. A band-aid on arterial bleeding. Sorry doesn't bring him back. Daniel's jaw worked. You weren't there when he needed you. When we all needed you, you just ran. I didn't run. I broke. Maya's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. I lost everything, Daniel. The shop, the house, Jake, Mom. I had nothing left and I could not stand to watch you all see how badly I'd failed. So instead you made us think you were dead? Made Dad die wondering if you'd given up completely? The accusation hung between them, true and terrible. Maya had no defense because there was no defense. She'd been so consumed by her own shame that she hadn't considered theirs. Hadn't thought about Sophia staying up nights calling hospitals and shelters. Hadn't imagined Daniel at their father's bedside lying about Maya's whereabouts to spare a dying man more pain. Why didn't you come home when Dad got sick? Maya looked down at her ruined hands. Because I thought he hated me. Thought I had nothing left to give him. He never hated you. Daniel's voice cracked. He was worried, scared. He kept asking if you were eating, if you had somewhere safe to sleep. Even dying, he was more concerned about you than himself. The words were worse than anger. Maya could have fought anger, but this grief-soaked truth broke through every defense she'd built. Her father's last thoughts had been of her, and she'd been too ashamed to receive them. Roy appeared from the office, his presence a buffer. You the brother? Daniel wiped his eyes quickly. Yeah. Daniel Torres. Roy Bishop. I employ your sister. She's one of the best mechanics I've ever worked with. Daniel's expression shifted slightly, surprise breaking through anger. You actually work here? 40 hours a week, learning welding, doing assessments, pulling parts. Roy's tone was matter-of-fact. She's earned every dollar I've paid her. Can I see? Daniel's question was directed at Maya, and his voice held something other than accusation. Actual curiosity. Maya gestured toward the RV, suddenly self-conscious about showing him her work. It's not finished. They walked inside together, Lily between them like a bridge. The interior transformation was visible even in its incomplete state. New subfloor, solid and level, frame rails reinforced with welded steel plates, electrical system roughed in, wires organized and labeled with the kind of precision that spoke to careful planning. The walls were still stripped to bare metal and wood frame, but the structure underneath was sound. Daniel walked through slowly, his accountant's eye cataloging details. He tested the floor with his weight, examined the welds, opened the electrical panel to see the breaker layout. When he reached the dinette bench, he saw the photo album and Bill's journal displayed there, and his expression shifted again. Who are they? The family who owned this before. They left it for whoever came next. Maya's voice was quiet. They traveled the country for 9 years, were happy. Then the wife died and the husband couldn't keep going. Daniel picked up the album, paging through carefully. They look like us, like we used to be. Yeah. He reached the photos from Helen's final year, the headscarves and weight loss that signaled illness. His finger traced the image of Helen and Bill on the RV steps, that last sunset in Sedona. Dad looked like this at the end, thin, tired, but still trying to smile for our sake. Maya's throat closed completely. She nodded because speaking was impossible. Daniel set the album down and turned to face her. His last words, Maya. His actual last words, not what Sophia told you on the phone. She softened it. I don't need to know. The truth would hurt worse than imagination. Yes, you do. Daniel's voice was firm, because you've been carrying the wrong version. He didn't say he was proud and that the shop wasn't the dream. He said, tell Maya the shop was never the dream. She was. Tell her to build something new. Tell her I'm sorry I made her think she had to be perfect. The words hit like a physical blow. Maya's knees buckled and she sat down hard on the dinette bench. Her father's last thoughts hadn't been disappointment. They'd been apology. He'd thought he'd failed her by setting expectations too high, by making her believe that the shop was more important than her own happiness. He wasn't disappointed in me? God, no. Daniel sat across from her, his anger finally giving way to grief they could share. He was scared for you. Kept saying he should have told you more often that you were enough, exactly as you were. that the shop was just metal and tools, but you were his daughter. Maya broke then, truly broke, the kind of crying that came from a place too deep for control. Daniel reached across the table and took her hands, grease and all, and held on while she fell apart. Lily climbed onto the bench beside her, small arms wrapping around her waist, and the three of them sat like that while Maya finally mourned properly. When she could breathe again, Daniel pulled something from his pocket, a bundle wrapped in shop rag tied with string. Dad gave this to me 6 months before he died. Made me promise to get it to you no matter what. Maya unwrapped it with shaking hands, her father's pocket knife, the Victorinox Craftsman with red handle worn smooth from 40 years of use. The engraving was still visible. R. Torres, Master Mechanic, 1982. This had been his first real tool, bought with money from his first paying job. He'd carried it every day of his adult life. There's something inside. Daniel's voice was gentle. Maya opened the main blade, then the screwdriver slot. A piece of paper was wedged there, folded impossibly small. She extracted it carefully, unfolded it with reverent fingers. Her father's handwriting, cramped but legible. Maya, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I should have said this when I was alive, but I was too proud. Losing the shop doesn't mean you failed. It means the world failed to see what you could do. You are the best mechanic I ever trained. Better than me, better than your grandfather. Build something new. Make it yours. Don't live in our shadow. I'm proud of you. Always was, even when I didn't show it. Te amo, mija. Dad. Maya pressed the note to her chest, the paper thin as breath, the words heavier than anything she'd ever carried. Her father had known, had understood, had tried to tell her in the only way he knew how, by leaving proof that would survive him. Daniel stood, walking to the window. When he spoke again, his voice was thick. I was angry at you for months, angry that you left, that you missed the funeral, that you made us all worry. But standing here, seeing what you've built with nothing, I get it now. Get what? Why you had to disappear? Daniel turned back to face her. You couldn't rebuild yourself while we were watching. Couldn't figure out who you were separate from who we expected you to be. I still should have called. Yeah, but you're calling now. That's what matters. They spent the afternoon together, the three siblings reunited through tragedy and time. Daniel helped Maya install wall panels, his inexperience making him clumsy, but his determination keeping him trying. Lily fetched tools and held flashlights, proud to be useful. Roy brought dinner, his famous chili with cornbread, and they ate crowded around the dinette table that was finally solid enough to bear weight. Sophia called that evening, and Daniel put her on speaker. Maya listened to her sister's voice, thick with emotion, telling her about the funeral, about the customers who'd come to pay respects, about the wreath they'd placed that said, "Beloved Father and Master Mechanic." Sophia had saved her a funeral program, had kept a newspaper obituary, had collected memories from people whose lives Roberto Torres had touched. When can I visit? Sophia's question was tentative, afraid of rejection. Anytime. Maya's voice steadied. I'm not disappearing again. Good. Because we need you, Maya. Not the version of you who ran the shop, just you. After the call ended, Daniel showed her photos on his phone. Their father's service, hundreds of people filling a church that barely held them all. The casket covered in flowers. Sophia and Daniel flanking the space where Maya should have stood, but also surprisingly photos of hope. Sophia's engagement ring, Daniel's new house. Life continuing despite loss, because that's what life did. I should go. Daniel stood stretching. I took 3 days off work, but I need to get back. But Maya, I'm coming back next month, and Sophia wants to visit next week. Okay. The word felt like commitment, like opening a door she'd nailed shut. And Maya? Daniel paused in the doorway. What you're building here, it matters. Not just the RV, the whole thing. You're proving something important. What's that? That starting over doesn't mean starting from nothing. You carry everything you've learned, everyone who's loved you. That's not failure. That's foundation. After he left, Maya sat alone in the RV's partially restored interior. She placed her father's knife in the wooden box beside Helen's ring and Bill's journal, creating a collection of inheritance and instruction. These objects were proof that love outlasted loss, that the dead could speak to the living through carefully chosen remnants. The following week became a blur of progress. With Daniel's words echoing in her head and her father's knife in her pocket, Maya worked with renewed purpose. The walls went up, cedar planking reclaimed from a barn demolition that Roy had stored for years. The wood had character, knots, and grain patterns that told stories of its own. Maya installed each board with care, creating a warm interior that smelled like forests and second chances. Roy taught her plumbing next, the art of sweating copper pipes and installing fixtures that wouldn't leak. They ran fresh water lines and drain lines, replacing everything the freeze-thaw cycles had destroyed. Maya's hands learned the weight of a torch, the precise heat needed to make solder flow, the satisfaction of joints that held pressure. The kitchen took shape. A butcher block counter salvaged from a restaurant closure, sanded smooth and sealed. An undermount sink from Roy's inventory, stainless steel that reflected light, brass faucets that Maya polished until they gleamed. Oak cabinets rescued from an estate sale, refinished with patience that would have been impossible months ago. Lily helped with painting, her small hands careful with the brush as she worked on cabinet interiors. The child sang while she worked, made up songs about RVs and adventures and families that fix broken things. Maya listened and felt something shift in her chest, some locked door finally opening. Her daughter was happy, actually happy, in a way she hadn't been since before Jake left, before the shop closed, before everything fell apart. Sophia visited on a Saturday, bringing her fiancé Marcus and enough food to feed a construction crew. She cried when she saw the RV, when she understood what Maya had been building. Not just shelter, but proof that their father's training hadn't been wasted, that the skill passed down through 3 generations was alive and purposeful. "You did this?" Sophia walked through with the same slow amazement Daniel had shown. "All of this? Every inch." Maya felt pride for the first time in months, the kind that came from earned accomplishment rather than borrowed identity. Marcus, quiet until now, examined the electrical panel with professional interest. "I'm a nurse, but my dad was an electrician. This is code-compliant work. Better than code. Learned from watching Dad. Though I never thought I'd use it for this." They spent the day together, Sophia and Marcus, helping to install the last of the wall panels while Lily showed her aunt every detail of the restoration. Sophia listened with the kind of attention that made clear she understood what was being offered. A bridge back to family, built one small board at a time. As the sun set, they sat outside the RV on folding chairs Roy had provided, drinking beer and lemonade and watching the desert turn gold. Sophia reached over and took Maya's hand, squeezing once before letting go. "I'm getting married in October. I want you there. Not as penance, not because you owe me, because you're my sister and I love you. I'll be there." Maya's voice was sure. "I promise." Sophia pulled an envelope from her purse, different from the one that had arrived weeks ago. "This came to the house. It's addressed to you from the insurance company." Maya opened it with the kind of dread that came from experience. Legal letterhead, formal language, the bureaucratic dance of institutions covering themselves. But the content made her read twice to confirm understanding. Torres Auto Repair's commercial insurance policy had included a business interruption clause she'd forgotten about. A clause her father had insisted on years ago over her objections that it was unnecessary expense. The foreclosure triggered a payout, delayed by processing and investigation, but finally approved. $43,000. After legal fees and administrative costs, $37,000 would be deposited in her account within 10 business days. Maya's hand shook. This was more money than she'd earned in the best year the shop had ever had. This was security, breathing room, possibility. This was her father reaching back through death to provide one more time. He knew. Sophia's voice was soft. "Dad knew about the clause. He mentioned it to me a month before he died. Said if the bank took the shop, you'd at least have something to rebuild with. $37,000 meant freedom from 3-month contracts. Meant the ability to buy parts at full price instead of bartering labor. Meant health insurance for Lily, a working vehicle, stability that didn't depend on anyone's charity." But sitting there in the desert evening, surrounded by people who loved her despite everything, Maya understood something important. The money mattered, but it wasn't what had saved her. The work had saved her. The rebuilding, the daily proof that broken things could be made whole with enough patience and skill. The VHS tape sat in its case for another week, unopened. Maya knew it was there, knew it contained Bill Crawford's final gift to Helen, but she couldn't bring herself to watch. Some grief was too raw even when it belonged to strangers. But finally, one evening after Lily had fallen asleep and the salvage yard was quiet except for wind and distant coyotes, Maya set up the old TV VCR combination Roy had found in inventory. She inserted the tape, her finger hovering over play for a long moment before pressing down. The screen flickered. Bill Crawford's face appeared, older than the early photos but younger than the final ones, recorded in that year between diagnosis and death when hope was still fighting. His voice was rough with emotion. "Helen, baby, you're sleeping right now. Hospice nurse says you have days, maybe a week. I wanted to give you something. So here it is, us." The footage that followed was compiled from years of home videos. Bill and Helen's wedding in 1969, both of them impossibly young, dancing with the kind of joy that assumed futures stretched forever. The RV purchase in 1984, their children bouncing with excitement while Helen cried happy tears. Road trips documented in fragments, kids running through Yellowstone geysers, the family tiny against the Grand Canyon's vastness, roasting marshmallows at Lake Tahoe while Tommy told ghost stories that made everyone laugh. Helen singing off-key while washing dishes in the RV's tiny sink. Bill teaching Lisa to skip rocks at the Oregon coast. A birthday cake collapsing during transport. The family eating it with their hands while laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. Sunset after sunset filmed from the RV, each one different, each one documented because Helen had insisted. Bill's voice narrated over the montage, breaking frequently as emotion overwhelmed him. "Every mile with you was home. You made 27 feet feel like a universe. I don't know how to do this without you. The kids say I'll be okay. They're wrong. But I'm grateful. Grateful for every mile, every sunrise, every time you sang off-key and didn't care. This RV holds our best years. That's why I can't sell her. She's not metal. She's us." The final shot showed Bill setting the camera on a tripod in Helen's hospice room. He climbed carefully into the hospital bed beside his dying wife, took her hand, and closed his eyes. "I love you. I'll find you again. Wherever you go, I'll follow." Eventually, the screen went black. Maya sat in darkness, tears streaming down her face, understanding finally what Bill had left behind. Not just an RV or a mystery or hidden treasures. A testament to the fact that love survived everything, even death, even decades of grief, even strangers who needed proof that devotion was real and lasting and worth the pain it cost. She thought about her own loves, her parents who taught her that skill was a form of love made visible. Jake, who'd loved her until he didn't, teaching her that not all bonds lasted, but that didn't make them less real in the moment. Lily, sleeping peacefully in the RV's newly restored bedroom, proving that love could be simple and uncomplicated and exactly enough. The insurance money arrived on a Thursday morning, turning her bank balance from $218 to $37,218. Maya stared at the number on her phone screen, the comma that separated thousands from hundreds, the proof that her father's foresight had provided even after death. Roy found her standing motionless in the salvage yard, phone in hand. Good news or bad? Good, really good. She showed him the balance. Roy whistled low. That's freedom money, or reinvestment money. Maya pocketed the phone. "I've been thinking about something. After this RV is done, what if I used it? Used it how? Mobile mechanic workshop. Travel to communities that need help. Teach basic car repair to people who can't afford mechanics. Free workshops. Donations accepted, but not required." Roy's weathered face creased into something profound. That's what Margaret always wanted to do. Community outreach. She said knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. "Would you partner with me?" Maya's question came out tentative. "Bishop's Salvage Mobile Education Program. You provide parts and tools that cost. I provide the labor and teaching. We split donations 60-40. Me getting the 60 because I'm doing the traveling." Roy was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "Partners." The handshake felt like promise, like beginning, like the kind of commitment that changed trajectories. Richard Caldwell appeared one final time in the 8th week. His Mercedes rolled through the gate with the presumption of welcome, and he emerged wearing another expensive suit and an expression that suggested impending victory. Roy, I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to inform. The county has approved my development plan. Eminent domain proceedings begin in 30 days. You'll be compensated at fair market value, but this land is being acquired for public use. The words were legal theater, wielding government power as a weapon. Maya's blood went cold thinking about Lily, about the life they'd built here, about starting over again from nothing. But Roy's expression didn't shift. Funny thing about eminent domain, requires actual public use. Your shopping center isn't public use, it's private development. I've already filed an injunction with a lawyer who specializes in these cases. You want this land, you'll spend the next 5 years in court, and I'll win because precedent's on my side. Caldwell's face hardened. You're making a mistake. No, I'm making a stand. And you're going to lose because you confused money with power. They're not the same thing. Roy pulled a folder from his pocket, the same theatrical move Caldwell had attempted in reverse. This is documentation of every environmental regulation you've violated in your other developments, every building code you've skirted, every bribe you've paid to inspectors. I've been collecting evidence for 3 years waiting for you to push too hard. The color drained from Caldwell's face. You're bluffing. Try me. Roy's voice was granite. Walk away now and this stays between us. Push forward and I send everything to the state attorney general. Your choice. For a long moment the tableau held. Then Caldwell turned without another word, climbed into his Mercedes and drove away. The dust his tires kicked up settled slowly, like the end of something. Roy watched until the vehicle disappeared. Then he turned to Maya, his expression exhausted. That was 3 years of research, 3 years of documenting, preparing, waiting. You knew he'd come back. I knew men like him always do. They can't stand losing to someone they consider beneath them. But now it's over? Now it's over. Roy's shoulders relaxed fractionally, and now we build something that matters. The RV took its final form over the following week. Maya installed the last fixtures, tested every system, verified that water flowed and electricity hummed, and the engine that had been dead for 31 years now purred with rebuilt confidence. She hung curtains Sophia had made, light blue linen that filtered desert sun into something soft. She placed photos on the small shelf she'd built, the Torres family from better days, the Crawfords in their prime, and a new photo Roy had taken of Maya and Lily standing in front of the restored RV, both of them smiling. On the final day, Roy brought champagne in plastic cups. Daniel arrived with Sophia and Marcus, the family gathering to witness completion. They stood in the desert evening, the RV gleaming behind them, and Roy raised his cup. To second chances, to family. Sophia's voice was thick with emotion. To Dad's legacy. Daniel's eyes were bright. To courage. Marcus, always economical with words, made them count. Lily raised her cup of lemonade. To our home. Maya looked at each of them, these people who'd loved her through failure and rebuilding, who'd shown up when she needed them most. To the next story. They drank, the champagne, cheap but cold, the gesture worth everything. Then they toured the completed RV, exclaiming over details, marveling at transformation. The cedar walls glowing warm in lamplight, the kitchen functional and beautiful, the dinette solid enough to last generations, the bedroom small but sufficient, with storage built into every available space. The wooden box sat on a shelf near the dinette, visible but protected. Inside it, Helen's ring rested beside her letters, Bill's journal, and Roberto Torres' knife. A collection of inheritances, proof that the dead spoke to the living through carefully chosen remnants. On the wall above the dinette, Maya had carved new words beside Bill's original message. She'd borrowed his phrasing, his belief that this place was meant for specific people at specific times. To whoever comes next, you were meant to. Don't give up on this old girl. Don't give up on yourself. MT. 2024. 6 months later, Maya stood in a church parking lot in rural New Mexico, the RV parked beside her, with its hood raised and tools spread on a folding table. 15 people had signed up for the day's workshop. Basic car maintenance for single parents and anyone else who needed knowledge they couldn't afford to buy. She demonstrated oil changes, brake pad inspection, air filter replacement. Broke down each task into steps simple enough for beginners but thorough enough to build confidence. Watched faces light up with understanding, with the realization that these machines weren't mysteries, but puzzles that could be solved with patience and instruction. A woman named Carmen approached after, her hands still black with oil from changing her own filter. My car died last month. Mechanic quoted me $650 for an alternator. I couldn't afford it, almost lost my job. Maya had heard variations of this story dozens of times in the last 6 months. Show me your car. They diagnosed together, Maya teaching Carmen to read symptoms, to understand what each sound and smell meant. The alternator was indeed failing, and Maya happened to have a compatible rebuilt unit in the RV storage. $80 for the part. I'll help you install it. Today. Free. Carmen's eyes filled. Why, wow. Because someone gave me a chance when I had nothing. Now I pass it forward. They replaced the alternator together in the church parking lot while Carmen's 2 kids watched and asked questions. When the engine started, smooth and reliable, the kids cheered. Carmen hugged Maya with the fierce gratitude of someone whose life had just gotten measurably easier. That night, Maya wrote in her journal by lantern light while Lily slept in the bedroom. The entries had become regular, a practice borrowed from Bill Crawford's documentation but serving her own purpose, recording not just miles traveled and repairs made, but lives touched and knowledge shared. Day 187, stop 42. Taught 15 people today. Carmen's alternator. Her kids watched, learning that their mom could fix things, could solve problems, could be powerful. This is what Dad meant about legacy, not the shop's name on a building, the skill in capable hands. Tomorrow, Colorado, Women's Shelter requested a workshop. 23 people signed up. The work continues. She closed the journal and placed it beside the wooden box, creating her own archive of meaning. Someday, decades from now, someone else might find these records and understand what had happened here. How broken things had chosen their healer. How grief had transformed into purpose. How $1 and an impossible promise had built something larger than survival. Through the window, desert stars scattered light across endless sky. Maya thought about Helen Crawford, who'd watched these stars and known she was dying, but still believed in tomorrow. About Bill, who'd loved so deeply he couldn't let go, until he found a way to make his grief useful. About her father, Roberto, who'd planned for her future even when his own was ending. About all the people whose love had outlasted their lives, whose legacies lived in the hands and hearts of those who came after. Lily stirred in sleep, making soft sounds. Maya checked on her daughter, adjusting blankets, touching small shoulders to confirm reality. This child who'd spent months in a truck cab now slept in a room built by her mother's hands, had watched transformation happen through effort and patience, was learning that starting over wasn't failure, but courage made visible. The RV sat solid and warm around them, no longer a broken dream, but a vessel for new stories. Its walls held laughter from 2 families now, its frame supported by steel and promises kept. 27 feet of metal and wood and human determination, proof that the universe sometimes did put people where they needed to be. Maya returned to the dinette and picked up her father's knife, feeling its familiar weight. The blade was still sharp, the handle still smooth from decades of use. She opened it carefully, remembering the note hidden in the screwdriver slot, the final message that had changed everything. Build something new, he'd written. Make it yours, she had built, was still building. Every workshop was construction. Every person taught was a brick in a structure that would outlast her. The shop her family had lost was gone, but the knowledge it represented lived in her hands, her teaching, her refusal to let skill die with buildings. Outside, wind moved through the salvage yard, carrying scents of sage and possibility. Roy's lights were off, the old man sleeping in the house his father built, secure in the knowledge that his land would stay in Bishop hands, that Caldwell had retreated, that something good was growing in the space where threat had tried to take root. Maya placed the knife back in the wooden box beside Helen's ring, these talismans of inheritance and instruction. Tomorrow they would drive north toward Colorado, toward people who needed help, toward the work that justified everything. But tonight, in this moment, she allowed herself stillness, allowed herself to feel the weight of completion, of promises kept, of broken things made whole. She thought about the question Roy had asked that first day, running from something or towards something. She understood now that it had never been either or. You ran from shame while running toward redemption, fled failure while seeking purpose, left behind what you couldn't save while building what you could. The RV would carry her forward, this vessel built by two families and meant for countless more. Its frame held stories of love and loss, of cross-country adventures and hospice rooms, of divorce and foreclosure and the stubborn refusal to quit. Every weld she'd made was a sentence in that ongoing story. Every workshop she taught added another chapter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new communities, new people who needed to learn that they weren't helpless in the face of mechanical failure. But tonight belonged to completion, to the satisfaction of finishing what Bill Crawford started, to the promise that broken things could be restored with enough patience and skill and love. Maya turned off the lantern and lay down beside Lily's sleeping form. Through the window, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human drama, but somehow witnessing it anyway. She closed her eyes and felt the RV around her, solid and warm, 27 feet of proof that the universe sometimes offered second chances to those brave enough to accept them. Her last thought before sleep was a whisper of gratitude. To Bill and Helen for leaving something worth finding. To Roy for making space when she had nowhere to go. To Daniel and Sophia for loving her through failure. To her father for believing she could build something new. To Lily for being reason enough to keep trying. To everyone who'd proven that you could fall completely apart and still find ways to become whole. The RV sat in darkness, carrying two sleeping figures toward tomorrow. Its engine was ready, its tank was full, its purpose was clear, and somewhere in the walls between structure and story, the echoes of old love mixed with new hope, creating something neither family could have built alone. This was the next story, and it was just beginning.